Hi, I'm Jan,
And I'm Andrea.
and this is The Value Shift, where we interview CS and GTM leaders on how they reshape how to deliver customer value in new world of AI and market, and also a new year. So thanks, Billy, for being our first guest of 2026.
Yeah, and we're excited, Billy Grimley, that you can join us, Senior Director of Customer Success at Moss. And Billy's led multiple CS organizations, built CS operations at serious scale and a wide variety of scale, also led various functions across go-to-market, and has some very strong opinions on why classic CS tooling and structures fail in practice. I guess we'll get there soon. Billy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, hopefully it's not too confrontational, my views on it, but also I think always good to start with that everything that I always come from an SMB background, right? And I think probably that's the biggest distinction to make straight off the bat, right? Is enterprise and SMB, I think, is probably the biggest sort of delta between roles in what CS means. So I don't want lots of enterprise CS reps coming at me in the comments saying you're completely wrong. I'm sure I am for enterprise.
I appreciate
Great.
that distinction, having worked in both worlds. To me, a lot of times the SMB world almost feels a little bit more like the B2C world. How do you see kind of that distinction? Where do you see it lying?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved SMB. So every time I've dipped my toe into enterprise, it's exciting, right? There's something about closing sort of large multi-million pound contracts that everybody likes to see lots of numbers when they put something through. It's great. But I've always preferred SMB because I think it's really down to your skill as a customer success manager, as an account manager. It's not whether your legal team's able to do more red lines than the other team's legal team and these sorts of things that are the real blockers in a lot of those deals. It's not necessarily are you a better project manager than the other CSMs. It's are you able to convey value convincingly to normally quite a stressed person who's got about 9 different roles that they're doing concurrently. And can you make what you're saying important enough that they want to answer the phone to you the next time? And that's why I love the SMB bit. And I think it's got a lot of similarities with the B2C space as well because of that.
Cool. And maybe let's talk a bit about your current role in Moss, how it relates to SMB, what Moss does, and your team and role today, so that we can tie that back to the broader conversation.
Yeah, so I'm awfully new at Moss, still in my first quarter. Moss is redefining spend management for SMB, which was a big part of the draw for me. So I love that SMB space. Currently based in Berlin, and most of our clients are across Germany, the UK, and the Netherlands. And we're really focused on trying to, I think, reduce the amount of grey hair in finance teams by really trying to simplify the processes. And I was guilty of this myself as well. Before you're really involved in the finance process, do you take your expenses that seriously, doing them on time? Do you understand the importance of having done your POs correctly? All of these things maybe weren't particularly high on my list of priorities when I was not involved in it. And then suddenly you see the pressure and the stress that people are under. And so I've joined Moss to help scale out their CS team as we hopefully push towards eventually unicorn status, I think, is everyone's ultimate goal in any startup, right?
Talk a lot about customer value, and that's quite the customer value metric. Fewer gray hairs. After photos, I see your marketing campaign right now.
It's a very easy metric to use, right?
Absolutely.
Visual one.
And just to give a sense, how many customers Moss has or you manage on the CS side, just across like three countries? It's already quite a scale, right?
Yeah, so about 6,000 customers across 22 people in the CSM team at the moment.
Wow. And how do you think about coverage with that kind of numbers? Or how does you think about team structure and coverage together? Because I'm guessing those 22 people don't necessarily do all the same thing.
Yeah, so I think it's probably like a debate as old as CS, right, is who should be doing what. I started out at Trustpilot as a junior CSM a long time ago. And I think that probably shaped my view of where the delineation between each of the roles and responsibilities really should come from. We were very commercial at Trustpilot. So it was account management with some elements of customer success in it. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And so I always push back on this model, particularly in SMB, where you have CSMs who have no commercial responsibility, and then an account management team who come in and take all of the wins and avoid 95% of the long-term work that's been sitting there. And I think you see it a lot, right? A lot of the companies that I've joined, and I do a bit of consultancy on the side, you come in the first meeting and go, yeah, CS team's really demotivated. And you go, oh yeah. So they work really, really hard, but they don't get to have any of the success elements of the job. That's all given to another team. And I think that might be a good place to start, is maybe let them close the deals. And I'm a big believer, right? If you're talking to a customer all the time, why wouldn't you be the best person to make sure that they renew at a higher price? Why wouldn't you be the best person to point them towards different services that you offer and to do cross-sell and upsell it? To pass it to somebody else who doesn't have that relationship, doesn't have that knowledge, feels unnecessary. And so I think where I'm more keen to draw the line, and I think it's really dependent on the product, is around who does the onboarding. Because I think ultimately you can take, as a customer success manager, a really large portfolio and have the commercial and value responsibilities for those accounts. But I quite often think it's very hard to also care about onboarding enough to ensure that you've minimized churn risk in that portfolio long term. Because ultimately, if you've got a portfolio of 200, 500,000 customers and you're getting 5 onboardings a month, it's very hard for anyone to balance those two things in the way that you need them to be, right? And so I lean much more towards onboarding as a separate function, but staffed with very similar people, right? I think quite often when you talk to leaders about their onboarding team, they go, so we're looking for a very different type of person to our customer success team. And for me, I was like, why? These people need to be able to sell very hard. They need to be able to objection handle very hard. They need to use all of that skill set in order to get people who probably bought something that they've now deprioritized to some extent. Like, all of that skill set is the same skill set that's required to close a deal. And it's just as important as closing a deal. So why wouldn't you have equally strong people on those same sort of sales skill set doing both roles? I think people don't appreciate their onboarding teams enough. They get deprioritized even more than the CSM team. And the CSM team is the unloved stepchild of every commercial team already, right? And then within that, you normally have your onboarding team where everyone goes, oh yeah, and they've onboarded some accounts this month. Great work, everyone. But actually, like, the impact of them not doing that job properly is huge. And not putting your best people into that first sort of point of contact that people have, not running that in a very commercial way as well, I think is a mistake a lot of people make.
That's really interesting. Basically, the way you think about team split is you have a number of people allocated to onboarding, a number of people allocated to account management. And then how do you set up success metrics for the onboarding team? It's easy to say you have to onboard X people per month, which I think doesn't make a good job of explaining how complex that is. It's kind of like you're a cog in the machine, which is not true when you do onboarding. How do you think about onboarding success and the role of the onboarding team?
Before Moss, I worked for a company called Doctify, and we had very good onboarders there doing high volume. So they would onboard maybe 90 to 100 people across a quarter. So there was serious volume. But what we were targeting them on was to affect change on the metrics that we know cause churn. And we didn't see them any different to customer success managers. In fact, everyone there is either an account manager or an early stage account manager, because you're still account managing. It's the length of time you have the account and which part of the customer journey that you're looking after. But we know for a fact which metrics are going to impact our churn, which metrics prevent people from paying us more, and which metrics prevent people from, being eligible or a likely lead for an upsell. And so then we try and reverse engineer that into the onboarding process. So those are the metrics that we want you to get. They need to be trending towards certain levels of usage on different parts of the product, that we need to have X number of people who are involved in it, and also the commercial elements of it. There's loads of parts of the onboarding process where you can sell something to somebody. So again, why pass that to somebody else? You should be responsible. If somebody tries to churn during the onboarding process, that should be your number that you're holding. And a big part of it as well, we were always pushing very hard on the referral piece, and actually closed won referrals. Because again, like, best time that you're going to get a referral is when somebody's very happy in their first 3 months. If you've done the job properly, you should have the highest conversion rate of that. And we approached it a lot like sales. And it's the process I'm always trying to get for both onboarding and customer success is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, the sales process is really good. It has been around for hundreds of years. CS is relatively new. And if you look at a great sales team, they have fantastic metrics. They are able to really pull apart this data. And then you suddenly move into the CSM team and it's all a bit murkier, and everyone goes, yeah, but this customer's an orange one. And you're like, yeah, okay, but that wouldn't fly in the sales team if you went, this is an orange lead, So like, I really try to take what works in sales and apply it to both of these roles is crucial, because it does work.
You mentioned using pipeline as a tool for CS team, like taking a sales tool that I think I haven't seen used much in CS, right? It's always about allocation of a portfolio. In some of our preparation discussion, you mentioned, okay, I want CS to manage customers as a pipeline, just the same way as sales pipeline. Can you expand on that? Because that's not something we see often discussed in CS team, like having a pipeline, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, anyone who talks to me for more than about 10 minutes about CS will hear my boring views on Kanbans and why they're the best way of doing this. But I genuinely believe it. The best advice I got when I first became a commercial leader was I was talking to a sales manager whose team had never missed target. Everyone else's team had missed target and his team never had. And when you ask him why, he's like, yeah, because I know my numbers. I know exactly how many meetings everyone in his team needs to have had, how many calls they need to have booked in, all of these things. And it will tell all my funnel metrics. And I can say with certain confidence whether or not I'm going to hit target at the end of the month. And it makes sense. You know your average conversion rates, you know your success metrics. So you know how many people you need to be talking to in order to get there. And actually, that's a really simple, easy way to look at the world and to manage a process. And when you look at customer success, it's like we have people who are either enormously successful or unsuccessful, and we need to either extend that success or try and change the trajectory of their failure so that they stay with us. That's really pipeline management. Can I give you as a CS rep, here's some leads for customers who were using this product and aren't using this product. The end result isn't that I want to see additional money, it's that I want you to turn around this customer. And actually, I as a CS leader would want to know how successful you as an IC are at doing that. Because if you're 3 times better than everyone else in the team, there's something that you're doing there that's really successful you should roll out to everyone. And if you're not, then there's training that we need to do in order to help you. And it's the same with the renewal process, the same with the upsell process. But actually what I've always tried to build, and where I definitely want to get us to at Moss and where we were on our way to at Doctify, and we've managed to do in other teams, was be able to go through and say, right, these are the things that we know will impact churn. So these are leads that we can give to the CSM team. And we expect these leads to be worked through a pipeline within a certain amount of time. We want to have a certain level of conversion rate. And actually, like, really interesting metrics that you can get from that are, for example, like if you run an SDR team, you know your meeting booking rate. If your meeting booking rate is bad as an SDR, there is loads of training and enablement that you need as an SDR around what are you sending to the clients? What do you say? In CS, if you're working with a sort of what I would say is a normal size portfolio of like somewhere between 150 to 500 customers, you should be trying to book meetings all the time. No one ever knows their meeting booking rate. So you don't know if your reps are just sitting there sending out an email that nobody ever responds to all day, or having a call where they're not proposing value that the customer wants to engage with, so they don't want to come to the call. And actually, that's a really interesting thing to know that you lose, because in CS, nobody works with a sales funnel. And actually, we would want, or at least I would want to know, okay, so when we talk to a customer about this, we have very high success rate. People will come to those meetings. But as soon as you try and talk to them about this, they don't want to come to that meeting. Okay, do we need to try and combine these things? Because for us, selfishly, this element of this is really important. We know if you do this, that you're going to stay and we won't lose you, but we're going to have to hide it in a meeting about something else. Great. But you won't know that unless you're measuring those sorts of things, right? And it's where it becomes very hard to also like coach and train CS reps, because you have 4% of the data that a sales team has to coach their sales reps. And that's why great salespeople, I think, are sometimes really struggle when they move into a CS role, is because suddenly they're flying blind, right? They've had all this data, they've had all this knowledge, and then suddenly we give them a pinwheel with 3 different colors on it. Best of luck out there. Don't lose anyone.
A lot of what you're describing is a move that a lot of CS leaders, company leaders, would say their teams are needing to make. We're seeing a shift in general from CS away from just being the friends and the relationship managers to driving real business outcomes, real value, real measurable revenue. And this seems to have been your focus your whole career. So you're a step ahead of a lot of folks. I assume you've come into organizations where you've had to navigate that shift, both up, down, and sideways. How do you turn CS into more of a sales function? What are you looking for from a hiring perspective? What is that enablement looking like? What cultural shifts are you having to gate? What messaging? Like, what is that change management playbook?
If you join a company where things aren't going well, and for a period of time, that was my specialist thing, was I'd come in when everything was looking pretty dark. Everyone's more than happy to try anything then. Doesn't matter. If you could suggest anything and everyone's like, yeah, okay, whatever it takes, we'll do something. I think the hardest part is when it's working. Nobody wants to change anything when things are working. And like, to really convince people that there is a measurable benefit for doing things differently when it seems broadly okay is really tough. And then particularly where you have like the traditional CSM and account management split, and the account management team actually sits in sales, it's very hard to convince the sales leaders they should give up upsell that's probably feeding quite nicely into their targets, right? the dream is you show up and it's not working very well, and you come in and fix it, and everyone just sort of lets you get on with it. But the reality is that it's often going pretty well. I think it's really ultimately about resource, right? And like, particularly as we move into AI and scalability and efficiency, and also as it gets harder and harder to do big raises now, unless you are at an AI company, it's very hard to raise lots and lots of money. I always start to point towards how many people are involved on customers. And once you start calculating that up and you say, does it really require this many people? All of these account managers could be acquiring new business. Like, there's suddenly a bunch of trained people who can go and do new business. We already have the headcount from the CSM team. This can be really scalable and really lean. And I always want to do this as leanly as possible. And I think that argument works very well nowadays, where actually moving headcount away from frontline CS reps and investing it into ops is really important.
Mm.
Because ultimately you can be really scalable, right? You don't need to pay so much commission. You don't need to have so many headcount. Also, people in commercial roles tend to be quite transient. So you're probably looking at about 18 months on average. So you have to be able to replace them very quickly, and they have to ramp very fast and be able to achieve target. And so when you're sort of making that argument internally, that scalability piece of it, of we know these people are going to transition out. We know we need to be able to bring them in. At the moment, it's taking us 6 months to ramp them. We're having, probably most companies have 3 people per account. So you've got an onboarder, a CSM, and an account manager. If you can reduce that down to 2, it's a very effective argument to have. And also, I think it helps with retention, because I think it's a more exciting role when you're responsible for the whole thing. In my experience of doing this, those people are really good. Like, the CS reps are good at closing. They are good at identifying opportunities. They are good at all of the things that need to be done. So why shouldn't they get paid proper commission for doing that job? Why shouldn't they be successful? Why shouldn't they be able to celebrate their success with everyone? Why would you want to hand that over? And if you inject that success into a team, people tend to not leave because they feel like they're winning. So I think there's lots of strong arguments around to do it. The friction point with sales is always the toughest one, right? Because you're essentially taking pipeline out. But that's a discussion between the CFO, CCO, sales, and CS around where to redistribute those targets, because it is unlikely that a sales leader would be left with the same target having had the upsell element removed from it.
Yeah. And I guess that's an argument for having a CRO overseeing both and being responsible for the broad numbers in a way that makes it easier to arbitrage between the new business and existing business, like a strong CRO as a weight here.
Yeah. And I think that's where CS have to really fight the corner. But again, I think it's why you need to know your numbers, right? I think it comes back to that sort of early advice I got when starting in CS, was know your numbers, know your funnel metrics, and know the impact that you're having on the business, because everybody outside of CS thinks it's easy. Everyone. No one has any respect for how difficult the job is, right? They go, yeah, we've already closed them. Of course they're going to use it, and they're never going to churn. And actually doing an upsell is way easier than doing a new business deal. I've done both. I found sales was way easier. You could say broadly, like, I'm painting you a picture of the perfect world. Can I get you agree to it within a certain time frame and get you across the line? Actually delivering that perfect world for 10 years after the point of signature is really quite tough. And doing it at scale, I think it's very different. And nothing is your fault, but everything's your responsibility in CS, right? So finance will misbill them, support won't respond to them, product just explodes. All the things that we were going to build on the roadmap aren't getting built. And quite often, they won't like me saying it, but a lot of the CROs I've worked with, they kind of, CS just sits on the side and go, yeah, this thing, it works. It works because we've got a great process that means that we are able to consistently hit the target. And actually, there's a lot of work behind it. But I think we're always trying to demystify that, right? And show these deals don't close themselves, right? We have to go through this deal process. And again, if you don't have a sales process properly built out, you can't show how many leads, how long, how much effort are we investing into this? Actually, are we more effective or less effective in the sales team at being able to close these things? And also being able to fight for marketing resource as well, right? I'm seeing more and more and more marketing's getting rebranded as growth marketing in all the startups that I join. It's all pointed top of funnel.
Yeah.
And so really being able to get your C-suite, and normally I would say I'm reporting into a CCO or a CRO, but really trying to make sure that there is a fair distribution of marketing resource is also a pretty consistent fight that you will have, because upsells don't close themselves. I guess that's probably one of the main learnings I'm always trying to give anyone outside of CS.
And extending on that, and the previous comment you made is also, you mentioned ops and investing in ops. We've seen RevOps getting a huge share of resources, and especially the last year with all the new tooling coming, a huge amount of opportunities, it seems, for top of funnel and endlessly self-closing new businesses. And CS ops is something I don't think I've seen a strong agreement around the role, the need across companies. But
Yeah.
you mentioned if we get more, if we can reallocate resources and we get more ops, we can get more efficiency. How do you think about ops for CS effectively?
Yeah, I mean, probably regret saying it out loud, but I do genuinely believe it. I reckon I would sacrifice almost 20% of my IC headcount in any team I've ever run in order to be able to have 2 or 3 more ops headcount. Because I think it's the difference between being successful and not successful. There is always an easy tendency in CS to put too few customers on your CS team, right? To say, yeah, but we need to spend a lot of time with these customers. And my on it is I've got enough friends. I made 2 friends on my first day at university. I don't need more friends than that. I don't need to be friends with my CS managers. And CS leaders quite often forget we buy loads of technology and we don't want to sit in OKRs and we don't want to be friends with these CS reps and we don't want to talk to them because we're busy doing other things. And then suddenly sit with our teams and go, and I really want you to try and make sure all these people come to these meetings that I myself wouldn't go to. I think it's really like a challenge. So yeah, I think looking at what you're trying to get people to do is really important. And then you can be really scalable and efficient. And so for me, it's like actually coming back to the sales piece, right? Of like when you work in sales, you are given leads and they're all graded between whether they are terrible and very unlikely to close or whether they're highly likely to close. We have lead intent that's following that lead throughout. It's going through re-engagement. All of these things are happening in order to try and get better and better and better close rates. In CS, you have the smallest lead pool possible. There's no new leads coming in unless they're closed by sales. Your portfolio is pretty fixed size. And for most people, their churn is basically level with what's being added by sales. So you have this tiny, tiny lead pool. You can't afford to burn a single one, but we don't put anywhere near the same level of resource into nurturing those leads, working those leads, managing those leads, into the data to understand what's working well and what's not working well. We just go, no, it would be really good if we had a health score. And like the thing is, I hate the health score thing because it doesn't tell you anything. There's nothing to do with a health score. It looks great on a presentation, but it doesn't look as good when you sit there and you go through all of your ARPA and your LTV and your net revenue retention and your average deal increase. All of these metrics are way more interesting. All of your funnel metrics are way more interesting. Actually, no one cares about the health score because it doesn't really show you anything. Instead of a health score, I want to know a risk and opportunity score on each account. Is this account at risk? But that's really only useful if you have a really solid process to take a risk customer and run it through a process that is designed to reduce that risk and to be able to measure that risk, right? And to understand at the IC level who's very good at changing that risk profile and who's not, where are they struggling, what part of the process is falling apart, all of those things. And that's why I think you need to invest heavily in RevOps, because everybody goes and buys Tatango or ChurnZero or Gainsight. They put one overworked ops person on it with no support who can't plug it into anything in the rest of the business. And then everyone goes, I think it's not really that good. Well, no, of course it's not, because you've got 10 Salesforce experts working on Salesforce for the rest of the business. And that's kind of why I always push towards, even when you have ops resource, is it really worth buying a CS CRM? Because you're never going to have the support that Salesforce or whichever sales CRM you're using in the business has. You're never going to get that in CS. You're looking after 100% of the revenue of the company, and you will never have the resource that's being attributed to top of funnel acquisition. So going and buying something separate and trying to make that work is, I think, an impressive hope. But for most startups and smaller companies, it's not going to work. And so I always lean towards, can we get as many ops people as we possibly can? And can we use as many of the tools that sales are using as possible? Because we already have those people. We already have that. It's being tested. It's being built. Suddenly we're getting efficiency of scale, and we're not desperately trying to fight to get Gainsight to plug into something and to then in 6 months' time have somebody from the product team connect another bit of it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I've certainly gone that way with some of my teams too. I think it makes no sense to have the customer data living in all of these different silos across the customer life cycle. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to unify it all. We've talked throughout about running CS as a pipeline, unifying the tooling, bringing it together. But you did mention the data is lacking in CS. The big challenge that you must have of running CS as a pipeline is getting the data, figuring out what works, starting to structure the teams around that. As you're building out new teams and starting to build out CS processes, what are you very specifically looking at? And how do you go about taking a team who probably was running by gut and by feel and by color and turning that into a pipeline, and everything from change management to what are the metrics you are looking at and caring about and holding the team to, and how do you decide those are the right metrics?
Yeah, so I would always start with commission, I think is the crucial part, right? And I'm always surprised at how few CS teams like have true commission as well, and good commission that pays out well. It's something I think it's great. We're hiring at Moss, so if anybody's interested, like we pay good commission because we respect the role. We know that this is a commercial role and we want people to be successful in it. And a lot of the places that I've worked, the CS team is able to earn significant commission for the work they do. I think that's crucial. And then a bit you have to take from that is also the commission drives behavior. So everything that you put in that commission plan is what people are going to go after. And everything outside of it is going to be deprioed. I think that gives you basically the starting infrastructure to work back from. If you're working with net revenue retention, for example, and I think it's kind of where most people are. You can then start to, within that, is what's really important about our net revenue retention. So ultimately, it's not just upselling, it's mitigating churn. So the less churn we have, the better our net revenue retention is going to be without us having to sell so much. And also the big unseen revenue driver in CS is price increase at renewal. Like everyone's always after upsell and cross sell, but those are finite resources. If you picture the perfect CSM team, they could, in theory, do every single upsell available to them in a year, in a month. Then you have nothing left to sell. Price increase at renewal is consistent. It is always there. If you've delivered value across the term, you should be able to price increase at renewal. And so within your net revenue retention target that you set for somebody, they've got 3 levers that they can pull. Minimize the churn, maximize your price increase at renewal, and be realistic and consistent with your upsell opportunities, but you don't want to burn all of them in Q1. You need them to be coming in consistently over the quarter. And I think that then gives you a framework where you can work back from it around what do you need to track. And so in order to be able to do a price increase at renewal, we need customers who are engaged with the product. And so anybody who's not optimally using the product, once you get within 3 months of that renewal, probably isn't going to react to your phone call saying, hey, just to let you know, price is going up by 25%, particularly well. And so then the metrics that we're looking at renewal will be sort of a real breakdown of, okay, how many customers do you have in pipeline? How long is it taking you to get them through the renewal process? How many of them are you auto-renewing them? How many of them are you getting onto different pricing terms? How many of them are you adding different products and services to? What's your churn rate? What's your churn save rate? I think is a really crucial one. I don't just want to know how many customers you lose, but actually how many people asked to churn and how many did you save? Because that's an amazing metric to have. It's like actually in my portfolio, I've been asked 3 times as many times for a churn, but my churn rate is half everyone else's. Great. Then I am a fantastic CSM. My net revenue retention rate might be lower, but ultimately I am fighting churn way more than everyone else. And so like, I think it's a great metric to have. But outside of that, we need to have the metrics that hopefully mean that we're dealing with less of that, right? We want easy price increase at renewal conversations. We don't actually want to have to talk to anyone about churn. Something that we were really playing around with at Doctify, and particularly didn't have much budget. It was me and one other person in the company had to try and work out how we were going to do this. And so we just started feeding our product data, all anonymized and done correctly, into various different AI models to try and work out what are the patterns that we don't know about. And it's all of it, right? How long have they been here? What region are they in? How many stakeholders do we have? How often do they respond to email? Like every piece of data that we could get, we wanted to attach it all and start feeding it into these models to see if they could identify different risk profiles and be able to grade the accounts. And so I really like that idea of having a risk score attached to it. And when something has a risk score attached to it, being able to route that through to a CSM and say, look, you have this many customers who are at risk. We can actually then forward calculate what the chance of churn across the year is going to be. So we know what your gross revenue retention rate is likely to be if you do nothing. Then you can start to get people working with those leads, right? They can actually go out and try and change them. And every time they improve the risk score, their likely gross revenue retention rate over the year is changing. Suddenly we're able to start to forecast much more accurately where we're going to be. And so you can get really interesting. And actually, for me, that's the real value of AI. I'm not too fussed about the email chain summary stuff that everyone keeps trying to sell me from all the CSRMs. And I'm like, imagine this, you could know what's happened on the account. So like, yeah, I've got 22 people whose job it is to know what's happened on that account. I really need to know the summary of it. It's not that helpful. It's not the biggest problem in our world, but like actually being able to see what is really impacting churn risk and what makes people buy stuff, right? Like actually, how do we take somebody who was a very high chance of churning, change the profile of that account to be somebody who's got a very high chance of buying, and like stuff that tends to really play into that, right, is the things that we know in sales. And again, if you have a really good relationship with your sales team, go and talk to them about what their lead sourcing and lead scoring tools are, because they will be scoring all of this. They'll be looking at people's interactions on LinkedIn. They'll be looking at things that they've clicked on their website. They are doing so much research to work out who wants to buy. And actually, you can start to point that same technology at your client base and identify who would want to buy your upsells. And I think, again, it's why it works so well in sales. And quite often, particularly in startups, right, you'll meet a sales team. They've got this amazing process, fantastic lead scoring, all of these things. And no one just shifts that focus just slightly across into the CSM team to identify the same opportunities.
Super interesting. I'm guessing like the big difference here is you need to have a very strong relationship with the product team, right? Because I'm assuming a lot of the data you want to look at is user behavior in the product, right? Versus like, and in a paradoxical way, sometimes it's easier to get external signals than it is to get internal signals, which I guess is surprising, but not so much. How do you think about the relationship with product in that case? Because I'm assuming that's a huge component of success for this, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to be honest, you are going to have difficulty with everything, right? If the product team don't track interactions across the product.
Yeah.
If you don't track who clicks what, then to be honest, yeah, I think you would need to seriously sit down and try and work out what data points you have. But then again, there's lots of other things that you can look at. If you had no data, you still have how long's this customer been with us? What region are they in? What size of company? How many employees do they have? What industry? Like all of these types of things. Like have they recently received funding? Like actually you will have all of that data, right? So even if you have no product data, there is really interesting buying signals that you can get. And this is what the sales team's getting, right? Like they're going through Crunchbase, they're going through LinkedIn. This is where they're pulling all this data from. That's still as applicable to the CSM team as it ever was to the sales team, right? If you've just had funding, I really should start ringing you to see if you want to buy some more licenses or if you want to expand your footprint with us. No one ever gives that information to the CSM team. It just sits there in Salesforce if you're even still collecting it for your existing clients. So like even without the product information, there is already probably a wealth of information in your company that just doesn't get given to you. It's being just given to the sales team who don't use it because they've already closed the deal. And then I think once you look at the product side of things, even the basic stuff of like, can I just get the number of logins? Like these sorts of things tend to be tracked, but really the holy grail is to have it all in a format. And actually there are some really cool sort of CSM focused data analysis tools that are starting to come out, like Trig's one that I think's really cool, where you can start to just mainline all of this data into an AI tool that will actually begin to try and find the patterns for you. And I think even with basic data, you can patch that to the great data that your sales team will have, and you'll get something. And then with product, you need to do a lot of, normally if you've got nothing, it's all guesswork. What do I think is probably the most useful thing to have right now, and start there. But again, I think you're always beholden to somebody else, right? And I've worked in startups for a really long time. If you're going to rely on the product team to give you a bunch of data, it's always going to be quite a low priority, right? But there's so much data that you can build yourself within your CSM team that you can start with, right? So even if you can't get all of this product data, you can start to build processes that allow you to see, okay, what's my churn prevention rate? Great, that's a good starting point. I can understand that. What ties those companies together? What data do I have that shows customers who are successfully being stopped from churning and who aren't? Which rep is doing it really well? Like you can get something that you can go and start with today, rather than probably what is a 24-month change management process. Although I don't know about you guys, but I'm seeing more and more that is really being built in from the ground up.
Yeah.
Almost all the new startups that I've worked with, like that has been a pretty critical part of the product building, is we need to know who's clicking what and doing what. And I think that has definitely changed over like the last 10 years, where people have actually gone, be useful to know if people actually use any of the product or not.
Yeah. I mean, I can say as building a company in the super early stage, you can afford to do that, is like, hey, we just noticed you had an issue. You rage clicked on something. Can I help you? And people are grateful for that. Like you feel bad because you want this not to happen, but at the same time, like you're like just a second after someone rage clicked on something, being able to say, hey, I noticed something didn't work the way you wanted. Can I do anything for you? That's definitely a big difference maker.
Yeah. And actually, I think, I don't know if I'm obsessed with Intercom at the moment. So like it breaks my heart that it's only for support. And every time I ever meet anyone from their product team, I'm always trying to berate them to be like, it's not much change to make this really the most powerful CS tool that's ever existed. Data that you can get out of your support team, if they're using Intercom properly, is an absolute goldmine for like trying to understand what people like, what terminology they engage with, how they talk about the product, all of these things. I love it. I think it's really cool.
There is definitely a bunch of company running that fine line between CS and support. I think Pylon in the US is one. And I was at a very large conference of one of the CS players in software. I think the second most quoted company on stage beyond them was Intercoms. That tells you something.
It's the absolute dream job is probably being an Intercom CSM because no one's quitting that thing. Pricing model makes sense. You pay for what you use, you pay for the actual value that you get from it. It's upselling itself as you grow as a business, and it is just so good. Like out of the box just works. So I think if I could be an IC anywhere, pretty tough not to want to be an IC at Intercom, I think.
That's the place to be. And kind of segueing from that, a lot of these tools are built on AI or are leveraging the promise of AI. I love how you're like, I don't need another AI meeting summary app, but you have mentioned some pretty powerful uses. I'm curious kind of how you've been leveraging AI. What are some changes that you're making? And also, what changes aren't you making? What can't you replace? And how do you maximize human and machine at this point?
Yeah, it's always really difficult to not sound like a Luddite with it because there is loads of real power with it. But the thing is like all those automated SDR tools that just mass send emails to everybody, they didn't get rid of SDRs, and all it did was make people stop reading their emails. Kind of doesn't matter how good AI gets, people just don't want to engage with that. Like they've never wanted to engage with it. Anything at scale has kind of always under-delivered, and so I don't see a world in which people will want to get a call from an AI CSM. I don't really think that's going to work. I don't really see a world in which all of our emails are replaced by AI, really. I hate getting an AI email, and you can tell, right? And, it is what it is, but like, I kind of think if you're a CS rep trying to build rapport with somebody, actually, like the effort that you put into crafting an email, the effort that you put into the call that you're doing, like those are the bits that are defendable. Those are the bits that AI can't replace, and they're the bits that actually have value. If you think about most teams, most of what we pay CS reps to do has no value to the business, right? Because what they're really doing is admin. They're doing admin and data entry, and we pay people really well to spend a lot of their day doing admin and data entry. And actually, that's the bit where I think AI becomes really interesting, is not the meeting summaries, which are good. It's a useful thing to have, but it hasn't changed anyone's world. I think where AI becomes really valuable is if you've got a really complex product, every person that you hire really struggles to learn that product. They're on a call with a customer, they need to be able to answer the customer. For me, if you look at how good Intercom is, I as a CSM would want to be able to query the equivalent of Intercom and get an answer to a customer question straight away. I don't want to have to ask somebody on Slack. I don't want to have to search through the support center. I want an internal version of Intercom that I can email or like chat with a bot to get that answer straight away whilst I'm on the call or when I'm doing an email. I think that's enormously powerful, making sure that everybody's knowledge is where it needs to be and not flooding your product specialists and all of these sorts of things with the same 10 questions every day from your CSM team. And then I think the understanding your client base bit is also really great. Like I'm not good at maths. That was not what I was hired to do. It's not what I've ever been good at. So I'm not a data scientist. I find the AI stuff really interesting when it can go and do the data analysis for me in a way that makes sense, because you could always do it if you were really great with Excel and all of these sorts of things, which I'm also not great at. Suddenly I can paste a bunch of stuff into ChatGPT and I can get a really good analysis. That's really exciting for me. And I think for CS is being able to see patterns that you couldn't see before, test things that you couldn't test before, not really just the sort of large language summary piece, which has value, but I don't think it's big enough.
I think we agree. Text is not the only interesting things in company, and numbers are a massive part of that. So you need to combine the two together to make it make sense, right? I think the dream is to have the numbers and the text make sense together, understanding both product behavior and intercom comment and link it through in one go, right?
And also the thing I'm always boring sales ops with, because if you look at the UI of all of the AI tools, that for me is the exciting future of interacting with software. really, why do I still need to go and like manually create an opportunity in Salesforce? Why can't I just write in a text box, hey, I want to upsell this customer by this much starting from this date, and it come back and say, oh, actually that violates our policy. That customer actually can't be priced at that. It needs to be priced at this. Do you want me to process it? I don't need to keep creating opportunities in Salesforce. The really exciting thing in CS in the future is, and why I think investing in RevOps and being super scalable is because it won't be the difference between, who's got better meeting summaries and who hasn't. The difference will be between who can have 1,000 customers per CS rep super efficiently, super scalably, because their reps don't spend 10 hours a week creating opportunities, sending them for approval, getting it not approved, having it come back, creating a contract, sending a contract. And that really is work that doesn't need to exist anymore. Right? It's the least engaging part of the job. That should just be agentified out, and everything just becomes a chat GPT screen where I just say, look, I need to do this for this customer. Can you process it? Brilliant. I can't wait.
It really is amazing the amount of CSM time and support time that's spent behind the scenes, where exactly as you're saying, the value is the face-to-face, the fingertips to fingertips, right, of the emails and that human contact. But so much time is spent on the other things, and I think that's an exciting opportunity.
You see it a lot in CS as well. Everyone and their dog will come to you with an Excel sheet and go, I just need these customers to be called, or I just need all this information collected for these customers. And if you have a sales process for it, if product needs you to outreach to 50 customers, if you give your CS reps a Google sheet, maybe they did it, maybe they didn't. Did they call them enough? What did they say to them? We don't know. If you actually have a process where you can put them into a Kanban style view, we now know, yeah, we tried to call them all. Nobody wants to talk about this. Please don't give us a sheet again. But also that should be in the system, right? AI should be able to go, actually, don't just talk to this customer about this thing products asked. There's also a finance flag on this account. Oh, and they haven't used this product. Here's 5 things you can talk to them that mean you now need to do 4 less calls for this customer. And also their chance of churning has just gone to 0 because you've dealt with everything on one call. Great work. That's sort of the future that I really want to live in CS, because it's just so much more. It's so much more exciting and rewarding, and it's less surprising with the stuff that you didn't know you should have done that you haven't done. And it's being surprised that finance suddenly on the last day of the month go, oh, none of these people paid their invoice. You're like, okay, brilliant. Thank you.
And you can save a churn on the call. You can build that 15 minutes, you can build a relationship to the point that the person will say, I give you another shot. Like a great salesperson is really building relationship very quickly, be trusted on a call, and this is how you close an account. I think this is where what people do on a call with another person on the other side is where you can create this value, and you can give it. We will never be able to save this customer, and that 15-minute calls happen, and someone does a great job of doing everything needed and apologizing and making promises the right way and being trusted and understanding and saving a customer, right? I think that's the reality of the business as well.
It's the most valuable skill in CS is, can you sit quietly while somebody screams at you and at the end of it get them to change their mind?
Yeah, but that's not replaceable by, meeting summary or anything like that. It's like someone at some points need to create this kind of relationship at the end of the 15-minute shouting where, hey, but I will give you another chance because I trust you to make it work, and I trust you to represent the company and make it work for me.
I'll be very impressed if anyone ever builds something AI-led that customers are happy to shout at for 20 minutes. That's something people only really want to do to a human. So I think that bit's almost irreplaceable from the CS side is, can you be screamed at for 20 minutes? And as long as you can do that, you'll always have a place in a CSM team.
I'm not sure that's a good conclusion in a way, but I'm not sure it's a very positive one. This is how we
That's
are.
my favorite bit of it. That's the whole reason to work in SMB is that you get to have somebody who wildly loses their mind with you, but at the end of it can be convinced to stay. You're able, as long as you can weather that storm and at the end change their mind, they're going to be a happy customer for the next 12 months. And I think that's it's much less professional, a lot of the interactions that you have with the client base, but it is what I've always loved about it.
Excellent. Billy, just conscious of time here. Anything else, people, that type of profile you're looking for at Moss? I don't know if you're growing the team. Just curious on how you think about that.
So, I mean, I think Moss is probably a bit different to previous places that I've worked in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, right? So previous to Moss, I worked in a lot of companies where we were early stage, or we were really racing towards profitability. So we didn't want to have to raise again. We didn't want to have to, we didn't really have the budget for it, right? And I think what we always looked for when we were doing hiring there was people who normally hadn't done CS before, because we didn't want people to come in with preconceptions about how they think it should be done, because we did things very differently. We wanted them to come in with a mindset, which is that I wanted to talk to people and I want to be commercially successful. And so we found in it very successful vein of people who'd done 1, maybe 2 years in recruitment or something similar. Or also very strong is anyone who's had to do face-to-face sales. If you can go and try and sell internet to people outside Manchester Piccadilly for a whole year, fair play, you'll be an amazing CS rep, because the general public are always worse than SMB CS clients. But really, those sorts of segments we found to be really successful. So you've proved that you can talk to people and you want to talk to people. You've not gone too far down the sales route, because I think quite often people who've worked in sales really struggle with the inherent unfairness of CS. Like, CS is unfair. You have no control over your pipeline. Like I said earlier, nothing's your fault, but everything is your problem, is really true, right? I think if you've worked in sales where you can just keep dialing to try and get to target, it doesn't really work in CS. Everything is kind of stacking up against you. So people who have gone too far down that route, I think, struggle. Whereas, like, we found a real sweet spot with recruiters. It's high volume outbound cold calling. They've taken a lot of no's. They've proved that they enjoy talking to people, but they're maybe looking for something which is a bit different. Like, maybe don't see a long-term sort of career in recruitment. They needed something. And for us, yeah, it meant that we were able to ramp those people really well, because we didn't necessarily need to teach them the basic sales skills. We just need to teach them how we applied that to customer success. Yeah. Steal recruiters. Everyone reaching out to you on LinkedIn, just reply back to them with, would you prefer to work here instead?
That's a very strong tip. Billy, I wanted to really thank you for your time. I think it was really interesting, fun session to discuss, and personally learned a lot. And I think a couple of tips I'm going to keep. It's going to be taking a lot of smile for me to answer every recruiter trying to recruit them instead. That's a really good way of managing your mailbox, in a way that where something used to be annoying and is not annoying anymore, because it's like, would you like to be hired? I can also refer you to Billy, and I have friends looking to hire. That's a really fun one.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been really good.
Really enjoyed it. And I love your, I wrote down the save rate as a metric. I love that as one of the good metrics of success among the others that you have there, but it's a great one that is overlooked too often.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.